Just to indicate that with me is the Honourable Stuart Young, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain South, Senator the Honourable Port of Spain North St. Anne's West. I was just talking to Scotty a few minutes ago, yes. The Honourable Stuart Young, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, Senator the Honourable AMPLIA Brown, and myself. Just to give you an idea as to what we will be dealing with. Today, the Honourable Stuart Young will be dealing with matters as it relates to NGC and SIS, live sport. The Honourable Senator, the Honourable AMPLIA Brown, will be dealing with matters as it relates to Venezuela, and I will be dealing with matters as it relates to First Citizen Bank and the CU, fentanyl, issues relating to the book grant and late payments. So I'll now like to invite the Honourable Stuart Young, Member of Parliament for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West.
Thank you, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and good afternoon to all members of the media, wider viewing public of Trinidad and Tobago. As the Honourable Leader of the Opposition preluded, I am going to be dealing today with NGC, and in particular NGC and SIS. It was only recently that I called upon the government to be fully transparent with the population of Trinidad and Tobago with respect to an arbitration that has been taking place for quite a while, 8 to 9 years, between NGC and SIS. In March 2014, the UNC government had awarded a contract to SIS for $162 million US dollars, approximately 1.1 billion TT dollars, to design and build a water recycling plant at Beetham. We all know it as the Beetham wastewater plant contract. And from the outset, the award of this contract, and there were allegations surrounding it that there was corruption with respect to the bids and who got the highest bid or the lowest bid and these types of things. Nevertheless, they awarded it to SIS. The works were supposed to be completed by October 22nd, 2015. The UNC government paid SIS in cash from NGC's coffers, a mobilization advance of approximately 34.4 million US dollars, which was 226 million TT dollars, at 20% of the contract sum. Of course, the regular and normal mobilization is 10% of a contract. So immediately at the outset, you had the UNC government taking cash from NGC, doubling the mobilization fee and paying that to SIS, 226 million TT dollars. Furthermore, the original contract stated points at which SIS was supposed to repay these sums to NGC as work was carried on and done. The UNC government amended that contract to push back the date of the repayment of the 226 or the utilization of the $226 million to a point in time way after it was originally supposed to happen. And of course, the repayment never came, nor the value for work ever deducted from the sums of money that NGC continued to pay. NGC issued a notice of termination on its contract on 20th of November 2015, which was of course under the P&M administration. We came in September 2015. This was only done after SIS indicated that it had underbid on the project and said that it was demobilizing from the work site. So when the P&M came in September 2015, one of the first things SIS did was say they underbid on the project, they wanted more money than it was originally contracted for, and they began to demobilize and take all of their equipment off of the site. They began to distance themselves from completing the works on September 14th, 2015. The general election was 1 week before, on September 7th, 2015, and they started to demobilize by October 2015. By the time SIS was terminated, it had been paid $121,745,000 US, approximately 853 million TT dollars, which was supposed to represent 75% of the work completed. This was paid out of NGC's cash. On the 23rd of December 2015, NGC went to court, again on a PNM government's directions, and obtained an interim freezing order, freezing $180 million of SIS's assets. And I remember it at the time, because I was the one directing these things. We had found that assets were being shipped from Trinidad to the United States and being put to auction in the United States. So it became apparent to us that there was a liquidation starting to take place by SIS. Immediately, we instructed lawyers to go to court, and they successfully obtained an injunction freezing SIS's assets up to the tune of $180 million in December 2015. There's been extensive litigation related to this matter since late 2015 to protect NGC, the taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago, and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago by extension. There were court proceedings all the way to the Privy Council, where NGC succeeded in setting sham transactions aside. Because what SIS did is, with another company called Rainforest Resorts Limited, they gave 4 mortgages and a debenture to this shelf company, a company that had no assets. And again, NGC had to go to court to set these aside. It went all the way to the Privy Council. And it was on February 20th, 2020, in civil action of 2015-04374 between NGC, SIS, and Rainforest Resorts, Madam Justice Joan Charles set aside these mortgages and the debenture, calling them sham transactions. So again, this was done to protect the taxpayers and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And the court held that these were sham transactions, set them aside. There was complex and extensive litigation, but NGC was successful and ensured that it continued to freeze SIS's assets to the tune of $180 million. I'll provide at the end of this a handout capturing all of these facts, right? NGC commenced arbitration proceedings against SIS in 2016, where it sought inter alia to recover sums of money that it claimed were overpaid to SIS, plus other costs incurred subsequent to the termination of the contract. SIS counterclaimed in the arbitration that it was wrongfully terminated and claimed that NGC owed it money. Those arbitration proceedings, ladies and gentlemen, took place over the last 9 years, being prosecuted by NGC under PNM administration. Our policy was to protect the taxpayers and to pursue hundreds of millions of dollars that were paid and no value provided. The arbitration and its results, the decision, are and have to be in the public's interest. The outcome has to be of interest to us, the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. On August 16th of this year, a couple weeks ago, I called on the government and the current board of NGC to advise us, the population, as to whether NGC was successful in the arbitration. In fairness to the government and this new board of NGC, we allowed them the opportunity to respond, to provide the details to the population, to say whether NGC or SIS won this arbitration and what was the outcome. Of course, there's been crickets, radio silence, no response whatsoever. Today, I tell the population of Trinidad and Tobago, it is our understanding that the decision in the arbitration was handed down on or around the 1st of August, 3 weeks plus ago, and that NGC was successful. I'm asking the government today on your behalves and the board of NGC whether it was found that SIS was properly terminated and whether it was found that there was an overpayment to SIS of approximately $49 million, which is 343 million TT dollars, an overpayment found by the arbitrator, an overpayment to SIS of $343 million that must now be turned to the taxpayers and the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Further, was it part of the order that costs incurred after the termination are also to be paid by SIS to NGC in the sum of millions of dollars? And this is in addition, of course, to legal costs being awarded. Furthermore, it was shocking to me that there is a current board member. I'm asking the question, is there a current board member of the NGC appointed by the UNC government who was part of the over-certifying of payments to SIS for this Betham wastewater plant? Is there a current board member of the NGC appointed by this UNC government who was a person certifying overpayments to SIS with respect to this Betham wastewater plant that we now know was properly terminated, and an arbitrator has awarded that hundreds of millions of dollars are to be repaid to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago? Ladies and gentlemen, once again, it is the PNM government who pursued this on your behalves, and it is a PNM administration's policy with respect to corruption, allegations of corruption, and the pursuit of white-collar crime, that today we can ask this government that is in place now on the current NGC board, what are they going to do about the recovery of these hundreds of millions of dollars on your behalf? And also, why is it that they did not tell the population this was the result of the arbitration? The second point I'd like to raise is with respect to a recent decision of the High Court on July 23rd, 2025, and this is between the Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago and the former directors of the Sport Company. This is part of the live sport debacle. On the 23rd of July 2025, the Honorable Justice Rahim gave a decision that should be a warning for all of those who are now on boards who can find themselves in similar situations. The court in this matter related to live sport has found that those former directors and some of the executive management are liable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago in that the decision that they carried out, and this judgment speaks to it, instructions from the Ministry of Sport with respect to live sport to award a sole select contract to a company called E-Beam. Rewind a little bit. Months before this decision, Sport Company of Trinidad and Tobago was successful against E-Beam, a company owned by a Mr. Daniel at the time, who is now deceased, where a sole select contract of over $30 million was directed to Sport TT to be given, and the services were never provided. The court ordered in that matter that E-Beam should repay Sport TT $30 million. This is the follow-up. Again, it was a PNM government that decided to make sure that the law was upheld. The directors were found liable. In that, instructions came directly from the Ministry of Sport to use sole select, a company. They were told who is the company, not even told to use just a sole select tender process. They were told, use E-Beam. This is what you're to award. This is what it is for. And the court has found that directors should not take those types of directions. They have a duty to the companies of which they are directors. They have fiduciary duties. And this now is a landmark case. So I'm warning, we, the PNM administration, are warning all of those who now hold board positions. If you are given instructions by those outside of the company to do certain things that you have concerns about, to break the law, and now you have public procurement law in place, which makes it even more onerous, you will be held personally liable. So that is another example We pursued on 2 occasions corruption related to live sport, and the PNM administration was successful in both with respect to these matters. There are other matters in court right now. These are civil matters. And I'm asking the population to keep a very close eye on the EMBD matters, where there are serious allegations of corruption. You had a judge at first instance, then Justice Abood in 2020, August 2020, finding that there were allegations of corruption that needed to be answered. The matter went all the way up to the Privy Council. Privy Council rejected some of the appeals. Defenses were supposed to be filed. And if the government believes that they can just discontinue these matters and sweep all of these allegations under the rug, the population of Trinidad and Tobago should be concerned. It is of note to us as well that what happened is the current chairman of NGC, an attorney at law, came out a few weeks ago, and I suspect it is because they knew, or this decision of NGC SIS was on its way to start shouting about millions of dollars in fees being paid to the attorneys. The first point is, I found it quite ironical and hypocritical that that particular individual was speaking about feeding on the trough by lawyers. And I remind you, in the period 2010 to 2015, that individual sent 2 invoices to the state and state bodies for $1 million each. One invoice, $1 million for a pre-action protocol letter, the current chairman of NGC, and another for $1 million for a statement of case. There is no way that a pre-action protocol letter or a statement of case could ever cost $1 million each. But that is the type of individual we're dealing with, and the individuals we're dealing with. Very briefly, it was quite timely that yesterday NGC published its financial statements for the year ended 2024, 31st of December. And I'm hearing it all over the news about the success of NGC and how it's made $1.6 billion in profit and how well it has done and the turnaround. I just wanted to point out to the population that is for the year ended December 2024. All of that, again, is as a result of the PNM policies, the work we did, and all that we brought home. And one only needs to read, again, quite ironic, the chairman's report signed by a Mr. Gerald Ramdeen, where they talk about all of the success NGC had and how they recorded a profit after tax of $1.6 billion. And this represents a vast and welcome improvement of the loss of $2.9 billion from a reported loss of $1.3 billion for the previous year, 2023. And he goes on to say the loss recorded in 2023 was principally as a result of impairment charges of $1.8 billion. That loss was as a direct result of the work done by the UNC in 2010 to 2015, where they negotiated a bad contract for NGC, and NGC continues to have losses in the billions of dollars. It goes on to talk about why it was successful. The restructuring of Atlantic Trains 2 and 3 became effective on the 1st of October 2024, which represented a new opportunity for NGC to sell cargoes of LNG. Never happened before. Again, that is the work of the previous PNM administration, who from 2018 to December 2023 negotiated with BP and Shell for the restructuring of Atlantic LNG. One of the things, apart from higher gas prices, we managed to negotiate on your behalf was we also negotiated a shareholding in Trains 2 and 3, where we can now get cargoes for 2 and 3. And that is one of the things that is bringing success to NGC today. Again, pure PNM policy and competence. They go on to talk about Beachfield Manatee upgrade in 2024, which is going to be used for Shell Manatee. Again, that was PNM policy. And when you read through this, everything in here, they talk about Project Lara and the first industrial scale solar park at Brechin Castle, NGC. Again, PNM policy. And the first LNG cargoes from Atlantic Trains 2 and 3 following the commercial restructuring exercise. The achievement of National Energy Corporation in being awarded the best government initiative for its green hydrogen pilot plant project. It was the PNM cabinet that took the decision for us to pursue these things. So ladies and gentlemen, it is important that as we monitor NGC, we understand its success and its turnaround is due to the work of the previous administration. And I will end on the NGC point on this note. NGC will only be successful once there is gas for it to sell. NGC is going to have serious difficulties based on the policy decisions that this current government has taken to walk away from cross-border gas. You would recall the Prime Minister immediately on her swearing in saying Dragon is dead, and immediately talking about Grenada, Guyana, and Suriname. We now know that none of those will come to fruition anytime soon, if ever. So, ladies and gentlemen, NGC has to be carefully looked at, and now that it has positive cash balances in the billions of dollars once again, let us continue to monitor it and make sure that what happened in 2010 to 2015 does not happen again, and it becomes a nest egg of corruption by the current administration. The last point I raised, because the media had reached out asking about it, is this debt that is owed to NGC by TNTech to about $7 billion. That is something that we grappled with. That is something that necessitates government intervention, and we will be looking on with interest to see, because when we came in 10 to 15, we inherited billions of dollars in debt in that area. The government has come out and said that they're not increasing electricity rates, which I understand is a policy decision. They must now look at how is TNTech going to repay that debt that NGC is carrying. Those are the matters that I came here to raise today, and I thank you. Thank you, Leader. The Leader of the Opposition would like me just to touch on the EMBD matter, as I did earlier. It is really to caution that there are civil matters in the court with respect to EMBD, including a claim against the current Minister of Energy and Energy Industries. These matters are supported by substantial evidence, including forensic evidence, including evidence where there's been a following of money and money payments. If you ever got sight of those pleadings that have been filed in that matter. And we're asking that the population pay close attention to this matter and make sure that it is not swept under the carpet. Make sure that it doesn't just disappear. Make sure that no false advice is given to discontinue it. Because like the other matters where we've met success, be it OES, be it NGC versus SIS, be it live sport, in the civil matters that we filed, this is yet another one that, based on the evidence that is present, should be pursued on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robinson. I recognize the presence of Member of Parliament Nyan Gatsby-Dolly and my colleague, Member of Parliament Stuart Young, who just presented. My task is to raise just two issues with you, members of the media and the national public of Trinidad and Tobago. But they are two major issues impacting today's headlines and impacting the public attention, attracting the public attention at this time, and rightfully so. The first is the government's reaction to a comment that was made in Washington, D.C. about Trinidad and Tobago in response, apparently, to political protests that were taking place in that city. Never in a million years would I have imagined that a foreign official would speak disparagingly about this country and a government minister would give approval or endorsement to those disparaging comments. It was bad enough when they ill-spoke this country when they were in opposition. It is far worse when they endorse negative comments about this country while in government. But it's even worse than that when the minister with responsibility for external affairs, and now the prime minister as well, have been endorsing these comments. Listen, we have no army really to defend the good name and image of this nation. We rely on our diplomats, our representatives, and government ministers and officers of state to defend and uplift the national brand and image at all times. And our foreign minister in particular is the custodian of our brand in overseas engagements. This really cuts to the core of his duties. I didn't think he would go as low as he did when he had boldly declared that he'd found an immediate solution to the UK visa imposition, and that was many months ago. But here we are, applauding as Trinidad and Tobago was used as a negative example in a domestic political exchange in another country. And I think he went so far as to say that he was unbothered by the negative references. Unbothered? But I have a lesson today for compatriot Minister Sean Sobers. The lesson is this. In foreign affairs, even if you're responding to a negative, you can create a positive, particularly if your response is diplomatic and prudent. You see, the Western media houses give significant coverage to the words of senior officials in Washington, D.C., and they also would give significant courage to global reactions to those comments. So instead of merely applauding when a negative is used about Trinidad and Tobago, we should be saying this, and I'll give an example. We in Trinidad and Tobago heard the name of our nation being used in another capital as an example of high crime in response to protesters. But listen, that is not the full picture about us and who we are. Yes, we have challenges with crime like many other countries, but we also have many advantages and assets. We have many advantages and assets in Trinidad and Tobago. We may not be a superpower like you, but we do have some superpowers, such as our diversity, our creativity, the greatest carnival in the world, the greatest street food in the world, such as doubles, and you can really pile on the positives. So that's really a way that you can take a negative, turn it into a positive, and ride the media coverage, as opposed to merely applauding or saying that you're unbothered when the name of your nation is used in such a negative reference. And in that way, we could be actually positively covered by CNN or The Daily Show or Colbert Report or wherever else, or even Fox News. We should never applaud or be unbothered when our nation's name is becoming a negative caricature in any foreign political discourse. The right-thinking and patriotic citizens of this nation have been speaking out on this issue. We heard loud and clear the excuse from Minister Sobers that, well, he thinks the Vice President was talking about the PNM, the PNM Trinidad and Tobago, or the Trinidad and Tobago of the PNM. Now, what is that? Is that a serious comment from a government and a cabinet minister? And here's another lesson for him. There is no such thing as the Trinidad and Tobago of the PNM or the Trinidad and Tobago of the UNC. We have one nation here, a united Trinidad and Tobago. And when serious countries engage with us or reference us, they are engaging with the state and not any political party. So leave those references to our domestic discourse. And when engaging with others, there is no PNM and UNC Trinidad and Tobago. So it's no good to justify any negative references to this country on the basis that you can read the mind of a foreign official in a foreign capital and draw a conclusion that it was a reference to a PNM Trinidad and Tobago. That is unintelligent, and it does no good to the national standard and the national image overseas, of which you are the custodian. Now, the other significant issue relates to the three distinct and differing positions from within the government of this country on the issue of Venezuela and the U.S. deployment of significant naval assets at this time. These assets include 3 guided missile destroyers and several other very powerful military vessels. Minister Sean Sobers, Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar, and former PNM Minister, now Ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago to CARICOM, Mr. Ralph Maraj, all gave in the space of about 24 hours 3 bizarrely different takes on this particular issue. And we are left, the national audience is left, and the regional audience is left to try to decipher a cogent and coherent foreign policy from 3 contradictory positions. Minister Sobers said, hands off, we are neutral, we are not getting involved in that. Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar gave her full support and endorsement to the U.S. deployment at this time. She went a bit further, which I'll describe shortly. And, well, Ambassador to CARICOM, Ralph Maraj, spoke in some detail about regime change in Caracas. Very unusual. Now, he's not ambassador to Caracas, you know. He's ambassador to CARICOM. He's not talking about CARICOM. He's talking about regime change in a sovereign neighboring state. In reality, what these 3 officers of Trinidad and Tobago have been doing is making a mockery of generations of hard work that has gone into crafting and building a credible and respectable foreign policy for this, our beloved nation. You'd recall the words of Errol Barrow, who's one of the founding fathers of CARICOM, along with Dr. Eric Williams, Forbes Burnham, and Michael Manley. We must be friends of all and satellites of none. Friends of all and satellites of none. That is not an anti-American position. And I hope the government is listening clearly. That is not an anti-American position. That is a pro-CARICOM position. That is not an anti-American position. That is a pro-Trinidad and Tobago position. In international affairs, we have always been punching above our weight class. But now under this government, we are punching ourselves and our CARICOM colleagues as well. Now look how the Prime Minister dismissed CARICOM in her statement. And this really was extremely unfortunate. It was a very poorly crafted statement in general, lots of repetition and littered with grammatical errors, but one line really jumps out. The Trinidad, and I'm quoting, the Trinidad and Tobago government has not engaged and has no intention of engaging CARICOM on this matter. She is speaking as the Prime Minister of a founding member state of CARICOM and also the Prime Minister with lead responsibility for regional security in the quasi-cabinet of, guess where? Of CARICOM itself. That is a repudiation of her duties and responsibilities to our regional family. The Trinidad and Tobago government has not engaged and has no intention of engaging CARICOM on this matter. And she goes on to declare very boldly, recklessly, and completely out of place, each member state can speak for themselves on this issue. In other words, every country for themselves. Who is she to make such a declaration? Especially when we in this country have worked so hard to uplift and build the profile of the very same CARICOM. And we've always taken our responsibilities extremely seriously. Clearly, she is not. So we as an opposition have to condemn in the clearest possible terms those words and the disregard the Prime Minister of this nation is showing to the Caribbean community. And it's really unfortunate because, and I have to say sinister, because even as that statement was being released by the Prime Minister, there are efforts underway to mobilize CARICOM to examine these very issues toward building a consensus. So what she has done there over 24 hours ago is to fire a shot across the bow of CARICOM solidarity and literally sabotage our region's ability to form a consensus and craft a united position on this very significant matter. As we speak, the COFCO, the Council basically of Foreign Ministers of CARICOM member states, is being assembled in an emergency meeting to treat with this very issue. When 24 hours ago, the Prime Minister of a founding member state has said, we have no intention of engaging CARICOM on this matter. Each member state can speak for themselves. And we will have some more to say about that in the future, but we want to underscore how reprehensible that statement was and those comments in particular. Remember, this same Prime Minister basically sold us down the river a few months ago when she publicly stated that we have adopted the policy of Washington, D.C. when it comes to relations with another sovereign state. Our policy is their policy. Again, these are unprecedented times with respect to how Trinidad and Tobago conducts itself in regional and international diplomacy. That was unnecessary and completely undermines our sovereign identity as a member state of the United Nations. And I'm glad we have the presence of the distinguished leader of the opposition today, because we need to remind this government that the last cabinet approved Trinidad and Tobago's candidature for a non-permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council. That campaign is due to kick off very shortly. A successful campaign is supposed to elevate Trinidad and Tobago's voice and perspectives as a participant and a broker in peace and diplomacy around the world. That's what that campaign is about. Can this current government and Prime Minister do that with that reckless and ill-conceived, ill-advised policy or policies? What is our perspective? Is it that of a satellite state? Which version of our policy would we be taking to the Security Council? The foreign ministers, Ralph Marajas, or Kamla Persad-Bissessers? And we're forced to ask the question, who exactly is advising the Prime Minister on these matters? Where's the advice coming from? Is it coming from Port of Spain? These are valid and important questions, members of the media. And we saw phrases being used, such as, in that reckless statement, such as Trump derangement syndrome tantrums. That's not Trinidad and Tobago language. Those references don't form part of our media or public or even social media discourse. So we have to pay attention when the Prime Minister of our country is using phraseology such as that. Really, really bizarre. Trump derangement syndrome tantrums. I'm just quoting. Where's this advice coming from? The irony is that Trinidad and Tobago, on the eve of campaigning for a non-permanent seat at the United Nations Security Council, where we are broker now in international peace and diplomacy, has gone completely silent on the important issues of our times. Completely silent on tariffs and their impact on fellow small island developing states, SIDS. Completely silent on Gaza. Completely silent on Haiti. Silent on visa restrictions against the government of Grenada. Silent on the unilateral embargo against the Cuban people. Silent on sanctions and attacks against the ICC. And silent on all the other important issues of our times. We can talk a little bit about the lack of patriotism of this UNC government, but I think we'll reserve that for some comments a little later on. But I invite the media to go onto the website of the Ministry of Foreign and CARICOM Affairs. It's available right now. And look at, under the caption, the foreign policy of Trinidad and Tobago. It's in black and white. And I can tell you that the pronouncements and utterances the current Prime Minister and the current government are at variance with the foreign policy of the very country that they were elected to lead at this time. What is their policy towards CARICOM? We see that there's no, first of all, there's no ambassador to Caracas at this time. There's no High Commissioner to Ghana. There's no ambassador to the United States of America. There's no ambassador to the Organization of American States. But there's an ambassador to CARICOM who's not talking about CARICOM, who's not talking about the CSME and free movement, and the other priorities that we've helped build and fashion and design, but talking about regime change in Venezuela. Just to conclude, I saw some comments that maybe AI helped craft the Prime Minister's release. I'm not sure, because even if AI had been used, I would have expected some reference to international law in a statement like that from the Prime Minister of a country. Some reference to the United Nations Charter. Some reference to the OAS Charter. Some reference to respect for territorial integrity. Some mention of the principle of non-interference and non-intervention in the sovereign affairs of another member state. Some mention of Parliament being consulted on the issue of foreign troops, permission to be granted for foreign troops to be stationed in Trinidad and Tobago on our soil. Some reference to Trinidad and Tobago's role within CARICOM. And I want the media and the public to spare a thought for our representatives and diplomats who are overseas at this time seeking to represent the same Trinidad and Tobago, who are under strain to interpret and explain these varying and reckless pronouncements to overseas parties, bodies, organizations, and member states. They are under pressure due to the recklessness of this government. How do you explain and interpret these things? Right here in Port of Spain, I can tell you that there are members of the diplomatic corps who are amazed and befuddled by what has been taking place and the general naivete coming from the government of Trinidad and Tobago on this matter. And I have to keep asking, who is advising them? You all would remember an issue that we spent a lot of time on with reference to the OPVs, the offshore patrol vessels. Now you may ask, how is that relevant today, Dr. Brown? Well, it is very, very relevant. Because I checked, and at the time, these were the words of this same Prime Minister, Kamla Persad-Bissessar, when she canceled the OPV contracts. You'd remember those vessels were part of Trinidad and Tobago's response, indigenous response, to coordinate with CARICOM colleagues in pushing back against the same drug and narcotics efforts taking place. I quote, "Do we need 3 OPVs?" This is Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar at the time. "Do we need 3 OPVs? The country is not at war out in the seas. The country is not at war out in the seas. The country is at war on the ground, in our streets and in the towns within Trinidad and Tobago. The money could be better spent on education and money for the police. That's the same UNC that is now clapping and cheering for, well, it's not 3 OPVs. There's the USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson, and several other large foreign military assets being stationed in the Southern Caribbean to do what? To combat drug trafficking, according to the dispatch from the United States government. So I hope you can see the clear irony in the position and words of the Prime Minister then and her position and words now, because apparently there's a war out in the seas now that she's in support of. Unintelligent, inconsistent, unreliable, and lacking in credibility with respect to the use of marine assets to deal with the drug trade. I've just described the United National Congress. There's a lot more that I could say. The last reference I would make is to Guyana, because I think the Prime Minister thought she was being clever. In the middle of all the cheering and clapping along, she included a little paragraph on Guyana. I think trying to say that a lot of this is about supporting Guyana. Well, we say yes to support for Guyana, and we've always been in strong solidarity with our fellow CARICOM member state, not in any unilateral guns of the Navarone style, but rather to work within the ambit of CARICOM, of which Guyana is another founding member, and with the Secretary General of the CARICOM Secretariat, and with the government of Guyana, on these challenging issues together. I would have expected a responsible Prime Minister in the current circumstances, given her role within CARICOM on security, regional security, to have convened, in collaboration with the chairman of CARICOM, a special meeting to generate a CARICOM position and response to recent developments. Instead, she's doing the exact opposite. That would have been a more responsible, prudent, and effective approach, as opposed to unilaterally, without even being asked, announcing via megaphone diplomacy, which is a particular style that has arisen in recent times. Megaphone diplomacy, basically announcing the availability of our shores for a particular type of military deployment. Never would we have imagined that Trinidad and Tobago would find itself being represented in such a reckless, uncoordinated, and ineffective manner. So, ladies and gentlemen, those are the two issues that I have been detailed to share with you, and I now hand over to the distinguished leader of the opposition, the Honorable Penelope Beckles-Robinson.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. So, I don't like to start with sad news, but it's important to inform the country that Dr. Lenny So I wanted to start because, I just found that out and it was important to make that statement. The other thing is that it's very difficult for me whether I go to the market, to the grocery, to not encounter the average person who is complaining about late payment of their salaries. As a matter of fact, the Honourable Member for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, the Honourable Stuart Young, just a while ago when we were talking just before this press conference, mentioned that in seeing members of the public, several of his constituents are coming complaining about late payment of their salaries. It is one thing to have sent home more than 30,000 persons, and it's another thing for the average person, the MTS worker, the daily rated worker, those working in local government, pensioners, days later after the end of the month, to be receiving, when you go, you know how difficult it is for the average person to go to the bank, and you have no money. So we are calling on this government to ensure that people receive their salaries on time. We are in the month of August. We are coming to the end of the month. We know very well that the average parent, and some of them living basically day to day, week to week, and to go and not receive your salaries and not get any indication that you're not going to get your salary, because daily rated workers were supposed to get paid last week, they were supposed to get paid on Friday, and they have not gotten paid. I am sure that all ministers receive their salaries on time and in the bank. So please, to the government, whatever is the reason that the Ministry of Finance is not able to pay salaries on time, we are calling on them, please, pay salaries on time. The other matter that is related to that is the issue of book grants. And again, as members of Parliament, speaking a while ago, and I know the Honourable Member of Parliament, Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly, raised this, I think it was 2 weeks ago. But here again, many of our constituents who applied, because I know this process was put in place since last year, and yet still we find ourselves in the month of August where the book grants are yet to be distributed. The government gave an additional week, so maybe that's the reason why, so they can put their house in order, and we are calling on the government to ensure that the book grants are distributed. Now, on behalf of the People's National Movement, we want to extend condolences to the family of Richard Cooper, who passed. He was one of those persons employed with the reforestation program who committed suicide. He lost his job and found himself in difficulties. And I hope this government understands the consequences to some of the average persons who can't always deal with the stress of having to face the market, the grocery, and having to go home very often to your wife and children and not able to provide the basics. The next matter I want to address is the issue of First Citizens Bank and Karen Darbesi, the CEO. Now, in the public domain, what is becoming customary with this government is that every time there is an issue, you have 3 and 4 different versions of what exactly is transpiring. So that we have the board indicating that Ms. Darbesi went on leave. We have in the public domain that Ms. Darbesi was asked to resign. What we do know is that Ms. Darbesi has gone on vacation. But let us ask the government to make it very clear whether or not the CEO resigned to the minister in the Ministry of Finance. We also are aware in the public domain that there is information that the Attorney General was asked to review her package. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves, because what we are very, very clear on is that First Citizens Bank is under the Companies Act. The board of directors of First Citizens Bank is solely responsible for matters as it relates to employment at the bank. And this government is clearly giving unto itself powers that it does not possess. So Corporation Sole is not an employer. We know that under the Financial Institutions Act and under the Securities Act, that the government does not have the power to do what they are doing. The CEO is not an employee of the state and therefore cannot tender a resignation to the state. The Honorable Minister of Finance or the Minister in the Ministry of Finance therefore cannot accept the resignation of any employee. We know that First Citizens Bank is a listed security and a corporate body. The CEO reports to the board, and any matters as it relates to employment is for that of the board. Now, First Citizen Bank has become a household name, so many persons may not remember that under the Patrick Manning administration, the First Citizen Bank was established after 3 failed indigenous banks. And First Citizens Bank has been doing very well. And this government needs to know that it is unacceptable to intrude into the affairs of one of the government's leading financial institutions. When you think of this situation, what do you think about? You think about the governor of the central bank. Same situation. Basically being told, resign or you're going to be fired. Now, fortunately for the bank at this point in time, they have resisted some political pressure. It is important for us to say to this government to keep your hands off First Citizens Bank. We know very well that, or we need to tell them, financial institutions are not playthings. Investor confidence is built on trust, and political interference shatters trust. So we want to say to this government that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are the majority shareholders of First Citizens Bank, and they deserve honesty and not backroom maneuvering. And when we talk about financial institutions, once you have political interference, then you have issues of trust. And we already know, as I stated a while ago, that this government is paying late salaries. We also know the issue of foreign exchange and the challenges. So please, keep your hands off First Citizens Bank. The other matter that I want to deal with is an issue that came up a while ago as it relates to fentanyl. Now, you would recall that I think it was on the 6th of August, some 3 weeks ago, that the Minister of Health indicated that 300 vials of fentanyl was missing. Now, why is this such an important matter? We are talking, of course, in the public domain of all this issue of narcotic drugs and cartels and all of that. And here it is, for those of us who may not know what that drug is. It is a potent synthetic opioid drug for pain relief. And I want you to listen very carefully. Approximately 100 times more potent than morphine and 50 times more potent than heroin, and as an analgesic, yes. and it causes drowsiness and side effects. This is a narcotic used only under strict medical supervision in hospital settings. So every Trinidadian and Tobagonian should be concerned about this disappearance of these 300 vials. And very often they lace fentanyl with cocaine. The government cannot be silent on this matter, because this is not the type of drug that you want simply disappearing and that they have all of a sudden become very, very silent. It is important for the Minister of Health to inform the public that this is a lethal drug, and it is the #1 cause of suicidal overdose in the ages 18 to 45 in the United States. So we are not going to let this pass idly. We are going to pay very close attention, and we are demanding the Minister of Health to tell the population what has happened to these vials of fentanyl. It is one thing for the government to be talking about drug cartels and narcotics, and yes, still right here in Trinidad and Tobago, they cannot tell us what has happened to this. The last matter that I'm going to speak about has again to do with yesterday when I was at the Santa Rosa First Peoples. A number of constituents raising the issue of the situation with the flag at Carifesta. Now, it is very clear that there are guidelines as it relates to our flag. So the concerns about the embroidery, the yellow embroidery, and what exactly happened, and whether or not our Foreign Affairs Ministry, whether the Ministry of Culture was aware. Now, I have done my own independent investigation, and I've been told that that was a procedure basically adopted by the Barbados government. But because you have seen it so much in the public domain, this issue being raised, it's important for the government to simply clear the air and let people know exactly the situation, so people don't form all sorts of views as they are doing. We already know what has been happening as it relates to the Independence Parade, and the public, of course, being very incensed that since this decision was taken a couple weeks ago, as it relates to several ministers of government being targeted, and the police coming out very clear and giving us a lot of information and a lot of detail as it relates to Minister Sturge, that to date no one has been arrested or charged, subject to correction as it relates to the SOE, and that no one has been arrested, notwithstanding all the details that have been provided by the police as it relates to the Honorable Minister Sturge. So that I now look forward to any questions you will ask of myself and my colleagues. You okay, come on, sir. Any questions? And we'll just shift accordingly.
Hi. So, first, condolences to you guys on the passing of Mr. Seith. I just want to ask, though, on a hopefully lighter note, for an update.
A lighter note.
Yeah, Mrs. Robinson Regis. We do know that she underwent a medical procedure. How is she doing? Can we get an update?
Okay. Well, I think it would have been a couple days ago. She indicated that she's improving. She's not yet 100%.
What does that mean for representation for her constituency? Does it mean that somebody would have to assist in daily runnings, meeting with constituents and that sort of thing? How does that work?
Well, I mean, save and except if I know for sure if the Honourable Minister believes that it is necessary for us to assist, we will. I mean, we have put in place coordinators in a number of constituencies where you don't have sitting members of parliament. So if that need arises, I mean, you know, there are several sister constituencies, and I'm sure that we will put that in place.
The only thing I'll add to that, leader of the opposition, political leader, is that with all of us as MPs, we all have infrastructure in place that our constituents are serviced all of the time. And I know that MP Robinson Regis is in constant contact with her office, and as the opposition leader said, in contact with the opposition leader and a number of us. And if the need arises, which I doubt it will, we will step in and assist.
Yeah, and I know that she also spoke with Chief Whip as well last week.
As the leader of the opposition, we did get a very extensive response and reaction to the Prime Minister's statements as it pertains to the impending arrival of these U.S. military assets in the Caribbean Sea.
Yes.
But as the leader of the opposition, what is your take on the comments that regional experts have said could open up the region to aggression?
Well, I mean, as you said, we would have had a discussion before this meeting. And I don't know I can add much to what Senator Brown said, but I get the distinct impression that the Honorable Prime Minister in some way is trying to put herself in a position where she's looked on favorably by the Trump administration. The truth is that we understand a scenario like this requires CARICOM to have one position. Now, we understand that there are many times you take a little while before you arrive at a position. That's why, because you have several states. So when you have several states, I mean, I served as the permanent representative at the United Nations. And there were several issues. I mean, in the Security Council, there are several times when we had to take a good while before you came to a decision. The UNGA is going to be sometime next month. And that's the time a number of prime ministers would meet, and you don't only, that's the occasion that you use to meet other countries. And I'm sure that, well, one expects the Honorable Prime Minister to attend next month. And again, attending UNGA, no doubt, it would be a time when a number of countries will engage her and the Foreign Affairs Minister because of what is being discussed here. So we are looking with great interest for her attendance at the UNGA and the outcome of those several discussions that would be had. Because clearly, it is not just CARICOM, but the entire world is looking to see what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. I mean, when you speak about, we see that the Honorable Prime Minister has come forward and literally offered Trinidad, as a place if certain things happen. She's saying very clearly, I mean, Trinidad is available. And the point about it is if we look at the information as it relates to the United States, I mean, they have bases. They have in Colombia, they have in Honduras, they have in the Bahamas, they have in Puerto Rico. Okay, so they have Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. So the impression that we have gotten is that the Honorable Prime Minister hasn't had any discussions. I mean, I don't know if the Prime Minister has, but if the Prime Minister has had discussions with the United States, then the Prime Minister should tell the country that she has had discussions. But that is not the case. I mean, she has come out very openly before any discussions, as far as I know, to say this is the position. And as the Honorable, Senator Brown said, why would the Prime Minister be so clear, pellucidly clear, to say to the world that I am not going to talk to CARICOM? Everybody for themselves. I mean, that can't be the case. We know that, let's take, for example, COVID that we have had recently, or if even we go back to Grenada. I mean, Trinidad and Tobago has always been clear on what our position is. But we understand that we have always been a zone of peace. And yes, the Prime Minister speaks about narcotics, but zone of peace means that there is no war. That is what we're speaking about. There is a big difference. And we are not, as an opposition, disputing the fact that we are not concerned about drug cartels and the influence from Colombia and Latin America. We are very clear that that has always been an issue, and we support activities to address those issues. But when you see the list of machinery and the kind of forces that are heading to the Caribbean, it must be a source of concern. And we certainly urge the Honorable Prime Minister to remember the importance of CARICOM. Because at the UN, and virtually for any issue that comes up, we must remember the significance of our brothers and sisters.
Do you think that the population should be concerned, considering the close proximity of Venezuela and Guyana to us, and the nature of the types of artillery coming into the region? Should we be concerned?
Of course we should be concerned. I mean, the thing is that even as Ukraine is that far, right, or several wars that have been far, I mean, we look at the consequences of that, right? So we understand that, you know, what has, even without a war existing in Latin America and Caribbean countries, in Venezuela, we have seen what has happened, the challenges that occur, so that you will already see in the public domain that the public is concerned. And as an opposition, we are absolutely concerned about the response of the government, and we look forward to a message. Well, let me put it differently. We look forward to the Honorable Prime Minister making herself available to the press, just as I am making myself available to the press, to be questioned and to say to the public. In other words, within recent times, we have seen a development where the Prime Minister is issuing press releases. We are saying to the Honorable Prime Minister, this is an extremely important matter. Make yourself available to the press and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago so you can be questioned, just as we are offering ourselves to be questioned, so we can get some clarity and we can be sure that this document, this press release that was put out, and everything that was stated there, that you can be questioned on it.
I want to ask, considering the extreme importance that this scenario weighs and carries, this statement coming from the Prime Minister would have been issued around 6 p.m. or so on Saturday evening. It's around 1 p.m. that this press conference was called. Some people are wondering why it took the opposition this long to comment on an issue of this magnitude.
Well, I don't know that we took long to comment. As a matter of fact, yesterday in Arima, Senator the Honorable Amory Brown spoke to the press. They might not have had a lot of media present to ask him those questions. Now, yes, it is always very convenient, similar to what the Prime Minister is doing, to send out a press release. Because it's very easy to send out a press release, but it's not easy to bring yourself here in the presence of the media and make yourself accountable and for the media to ask you questions. So I don't accept the fact that that is a long time. What is important is our willingness to come before the media, to come before the public and make ourselves available for any question that the press puts to us. So it, yes, sure. We can come right ahead.
And just to add to that, Leader, that is exactly how we operated in government as well.
Yes.
So you have a direct comparison.
Anything else you want to see, Amory?
Just with respect to the question of consultation with CARICOM, I think this is not the first time, but it's the clearest example of the disregard this UNC government has for CARICOM. You'd have seen a few comments previously. The absence of the Prime Minister from the heads of government, her first opportunity to participate and reintroduce herself. There are a number of new heads within the region at that meeting in Jamaica. She absented herself and sent 2 first-term novice ministers to represent Trinidad and Tobago at that particular event. You'd also recall the first opportunity for the Minister of Foreign Affairs to present himself at COFCO. They also decided not to attend that as well. So the signals to CARICOM have been very poor. This comes on the backs of their comments about TNT is not an ATM machine. And these things, while there may be short memories here, I could tell you in the region, memories are not short. So every opportunity this government would have to shed itself of that burden and the stigma of their horrible comments of the past, they should take it. And I certainly endorse the leader of the opposition in her recommendation that the Prime Minister get off of her chair or wherever she might be and go to the UN General Assembly, but don't go there and represent this country in the way that this did, represent properly consistent with our heritage and our legacy in punching above our weight class in international affairs and having a voice, an authentic Trinidad and Tobago and Caribbean voice of our own, not just echoing voices from elsewhere. So.
I want to ask MP Young, you would have spoken about the EMBD matter. To my recollection, in December 9th, 2024, they were supposed to submit their defense, and they didn't.
Okay.
So based on my following this matter, I have recognized that this EMBD case is appearing as though it's going to fall apart.
Well, which is why we as a responsible opposition came forward today to just bring it back into the public's view and attention. If deadlines have been missed for the filing of defenses, that is in fact a very, very serious breach. And the state, through EMBD, would be within its right to take certain actions to seek judgment in default of defense and these types of things. It has been a long time. Those proceedings were filed either in 2017, if I remember correctly. So there's been sufficient time for people to file defenses. From what I recall seeing, there's amended statements of claim that have very, very damning accusation based on evidence of money flows and money flows to certain people and the use of cell phones and text messages. So you, the media, joining on the heels of the leader of the opposition, follow up with those who are responsible, but let us make sure that the Attorney General's office or EMBD itself does not just let this matter disappear or sweep it under the carpet.
And I wanted to ask Senator Amy Brown, in 2019, the United National Congress would have supported Guaido as the favorable president for Venezuela. They never retracted that. So to me, I'm not surprised at the position that the Prime Minister has taken. What's your view on that?
Well, you're right. This is not the first reckless adventure that the UNC has embarked upon. This time, unfortunately, they are in the government and the cabinet of this country. So their pronouncements carry greater weight and import for the people of this country and the region. Your reference when they were in opposition and made an absurd decision to give support to a gentleman by the name of Juan Guaido as president of Venezuela, when there was no international support. The United Nations was very clear as to who would sit and represent Venezuela at that time. That decision did not stand the test of time. Mr. Guaido, as far as we're aware, is no longer a part of the active political process in Caracas. I don't know if the UNC has ever retracted that position, so maybe they still hold that view. But the point of the matter is, principles, when you stand on principles, as former Prime Minister Rowley advised me in day one in office, when you stand on principles, your decisions will stand the test of time and the examination of history. When you operate based on convenience, or you're trying to echo pronouncements from another capital, your decisions will fall apart the way that decision of the UNC has fallen into the dust of time. So it's a lesson if they are willing to learn from their mistakes, but clearly from the output on Saturday evening at, was it 6 p.m., those lessons are not being learned. It's very unfortunate. This is a long chronicle of unfortunate decisions that have implications. There will have to be work done in the future under Prime Minister Beckles Robinson to repair the damage being done to CARICOM and the brand of Trinidad and Tobago right now. And just to Ms. Polo, it's not just the People's National Movement and this opposition that is cautioning the government. And you're right, they're experts in this country, across the region, leading voices in foreign affairs, even former members of her own cabinet. I was quite surprised, pleasantly surprised, a former Attorney General, Gavin Nicholas, who doesn't often fall on the same page as the PNM at all, speaking with very clear voice, and again, not attacking the Prime Minister. We're not attacking her for attacking her sake, but sounding a clear voice of wisdom and caution that the government is going down the wrong road, and alerting the population that there are implications. This is not a movie we're looking at. There are implications if wars or conflict is to break out, and if Trinidad and Tobago is being drawn in the way we are pulling ourselves in, it appears. And I saw some very wise words of caution from him. I saw former Minister Cadiz and several others. So this is a case where, just like with the independence, the cancellation of the parade, voices, stakeholders right across the society of Trinidad and Tobago, this early in the term of a new government, are speaking up very clearly. I think that's a good sign for democracy.
Ms.
Okay,
Beckers?
so that's the last question, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm seeing where the People's National Movement is having an event on the 30th.
Yes,
of August.
you actually stole my thunder.
I
I was
sorry
just,
to
I was,
steal your
I was
thunder.
just going to close to say yes that we are having an event on
You want to give us some
Independence Day
information on
Eve.
it?
Yes, well, we'll be having it, just at City Hall in the area of Woodford Square, and we are inviting everyone to come so we can celebrate. Of course, the Prime Minister dared me to have a parade. It's not about a parade. We are having an event to recognize the importance of our anniversary. And we are inviting everyone to come. And of course, tomorrow we have our public meeting in Laventil. Is it Mova Laventil? Yeah, Mova Laventil. The Member of Parliament, Birchwood, in his constituency, where you will hear a little more in terms of some of the issues that was raised today.
What did we expect that he went on the 30th when he's silent forward? So what are we looking forward to?
Oh, Nian, you want to come and talk about it? Sure. Since Nian is the person who's spearheading.
Good afternoon, everyone. We don't want to steal too much thunder, but we are aiming to have a really wonderful event that involves elements of a procession, a light show. So we're asking persons to come with your cell phones charged. It really is a solemn event. It's not a party. It is a solemn event that is educational as well, and we're asking people to bring their children and their families, because it really is to ensure that we understand the importance of this commemoration. It's not about, just enjoying the cultural parts of it, even though we are going to have some aspects of culture, some dance, of course the national instrument, the steel pan, and some cultural and national street food that we will have provided for the public. However, it really is about the importance of independence, the history of independence, and so it's going to have some aspects of those things melded together in a very enjoyable experience. So we ask, bring the children, bring the families out. It's a free event. It is going to be in the front of City Hall, so it's an open event so that we can cater for as many people to come as possible, and so we are looking forward to you joining us to commemorate the independence on the eve of independence. It's on Saturday, August the 30th in Port of Spain, so we're looking forward to having you there from 5 p.m.
Okay, so folks, thank you very much. Yes, and we had quite a wonderful press conference. Thank you.